So after I've read, then Elmo Rosa Alvarez will read, followed by Patty Wixson, followed by Gary Lark, and last, Angela Decker. I want to thank Tom Hogan, Milwaukie Poetry Series, the committee, for asking Southern Oregon poets to be featured readers for July's First Friday reading and open mic. I'm Vince Wixson. Patty Wixson and I have gathered 3 other writers from our part of the state. Each of us will read 3 or 4 poems, then put our masks back on. I'll start by reading 3 recent poems. My Life Now. Last month on MSNBC, Senator Schumer spoke from his home about the virus bailout bill. Backed by a panel of exotic woods like the cutting boards made by our friend Bobo, Chuck's underlit face loomed too close to his computer. Partway through the interview, a stout woman in blouse and skirt walked with purpose onto the scene, opened a door, and disappeared. A minute later, the door opened, she reappeared empty-handed and strode off to the right. Who was she? Where'd she been? Bathroom, storage room, closet? It was a mystery. That's my life now, speculating about those entering the play, the bit players, the props, the pets, the backdrops. Is that abstract painting coordinating with Nancy Pelosi's scarf a Diebenkorn? He was from her neck of the woods. I couldn't catch the name of John Heilman's Great Dane, the younger one, who ignored John sitting on a stool, wandered through the airy kitchen, tongue snailing the edge of a counter, then clicked out the way he came in. And what's with those pineapples? On a bookshelf behind Judy Woodruff, Ron Chernow's latest biography lies on its back. It's 1,000 pages, so the title's easy to read, even from across my living room. Grant. My copy will arrive in 2 days. After describing his isolation, Nathan Lane gets up from the side of his bed and points his laptop at the wall to show off a signed photo of his idol, Walter Matthau, and Eugene O'Neill's monogrammed boxer shorts. E-O-N. Nathan assured us of their provenance. One thing Minnesota is known for is amateur baseball. And I played for some years with my hometown team, the Tracy Engineers. Town ball. High school and college summers, center field was my domain. Playing next to men in their 30s and 40s who farmed, ran the elevator, sold seed corn, worked construction. They focused on swinging for the fences, not running down fly balls on sticky August southwest Minnesota Sunday afternoons in wool uniforms with engineers sewn onto the front. Their wives and children watched from cars parked along the foul lines. Anything you can get to, Willie, they called from right and left field as I crouched staring into home, waiting for the pitch. Engineers because in its salad days, Tracy was a railroad center. Laura Ingalls Wilder waited there for a train to South Dakota. You could look it up. By the time I patrolled center field, the depot was gone, the roundhouse too, and the 2 hotels where workers put up, those in striped bib overalls and caps, who played cards and drank 3-2 beer in my uncle's pool hall. One night before my time, a few players got drunk after a game and commandeered an engine down the line as far as Garvin before coming to their senses. How many times after games had I heard that story in bars where Murley, the best player ever from Tracy High School, bought me 10 high sours. Carp, Big Daddy, Sam, Kurt, Pussarm, Haas, Billy, Bo, Lefty, Flatty, Harm Bogie. I played with them, then it was over. My education in dugouts and in cars covering a corner of the state were smart, funny, vulgar men who returned to work on Monday, while I left town for another kind of learning. I find even though they're the state of the world and the virus that I still write about topics like baseball in my youth on a farm in southwest Minnesota. I think this poem kind of meanders. The thing that probably holds it together is it's my meanderings. My State of the Union. Except for bullhead fishing from the bank, my folks seldom went near water in the land of 10,000 lakes, and 10,000 is not an exaggeration, take it from me. My mother was afraid, so I never learned to swim, and my father worked in the barn or fields, little time to give lessons. In retirement, they took a cruise off Florida and nearly froze. I'd been to Hawaii and snorkeled in mask and long flippers in waist-deep water, but no higher. It shocked me to see a photo of my father in a swimming suit, striding from a lake, his strong chest and arms, pale, skinny legs. I never saw him in shorts, and even in summer he wore long underwear. He was always cold, my mother always warm, dual controls on their electric blanket. We took 2 vacations when I was a kid. In the summers, my folks had a hired man they could trust to milk the cows morning and night, and not walk down the lane into town to the Legion Club, get drunk, spend the night in a ditch, and not make it back to the farm and his little room under the eaves. In our '49 Chevy, we drove to South Dakota and the Black Hills, got cold drinks at Wall Drug, wound through the Badlands, and witnessed the Passion Play and Spearfish, which seemed like the Song of Hiawatha pageant I saw with my Cub Scout troop on a lake close to home near Pipestone National Monument. A warm summer night, lights illuminating a stage, us far away from the action. And Mount Rushmore, the visitor center right out of North by Northwest, filmed just a few years later. On the outside deck, we put a dime into the slot of a telescope to see the faces close up for a minute before a cover slid over the lens. The other trip to northern Minnesota, where you can step over the Mississippi at its source and see statues of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox outside towns vying to claim them. I think of that trip when I watch the movie Fargo, which I've done many times. What else do I have to do when the country's opening up and I'm shutting down my own little rebellion? Except Fargo is set in winter, and not even in Fargo, not even in North Dakota, but mainly in Brainerd, one of the Paul and Babe towns. Marge Gunderson puffs back into the kitchen in her police parka, where her husband is tucking into pancakes in the breakfast nook before getting to work on his duck painting. "Prowler needs a jump," she says flatly, one of the best lines in movie history, and fitting for my home state, in which few words are needed, and they mainly concern the weather.
This poem is Marshall's Worker and is dedicated to my mother, Rosa Alvarez. Every day, the woman with sensible shoes, stocks, prices, and displays shoes that are a season behind, or shoes that are in season but are the miscellany of fashionable department stores. And every day, she serves up advice solicited by other workers and clients alike. One day, it's to a young Black lesbian desperate because her girlfriend has broken up with her. The woman who was once homophobic suggests what she knows: flowers and candy and saying I'm sorry. Another day, it's to a client with bleach blonde hair and tight J-Lo jeans who on her weekly visit confides about her fiancé's family, how they hate her for cradle robbing their tender boy, who upon marrying her will not only become a husband, but a father to her 3 children. She tells her to hold her temper, but not let anyone trample her. One day, it's listening to another worker, the man with the tattered shoes, who daily eats the same watery soup, but dignifies it with a napkin on his lap while he worries about his twin children, whom he will never see grow up because he will die in a hit and run sometime later on. The marshal's worker keeps busy in what she mostly thinks are insignificant chores and comes home tired. The second poem is called The Temple of Doom. We are going to the Temple of Doom, and no one wants to go. The Temple of Doom houses 10 people in 2 bedrooms, 3 if you count the living room, which has a full-size bed now sitting on a frame instead of the floor. The Temple of Doom, with curtains drawn tight and a door that is always closed, has no light except what is emitted from a blaring, often blurry TV that's on nonstop. The Temple of Doom has carpets that can't keep up with the 6 kids in the house and the patriarch groundskeeper muddy boots or grass-stained shoes. The Temple of Doom has couches that sag and have sweat outlines and other stains, which offer the inhabitants respite and which they offer up to guests. The Temple of Doom is a place where books have met certain death at the hands of small children that were not taught to care about words on a page, regardless of language. The Temple of Doom harbors the memory of a daughter who has never lived there and is not even on the family wall, but whose murder is a cause for her parents' migration up north. The Temple of Doom holds the despair of a single mother of 2 who can't make it on her own, so she has to resort to living with her sister and her sister's family because she has no social and no skills except those needed for working in the fields or cleaning homes or restaurants. The Temple of Doom nourishes the resentment of a teenager who is undocumented and wonders why she ought to stay in school, but is afraid of her mother's fate becoming her own if she leaves it. The Temple of Doom can barely contain the yearnings for home and for a father who hasn't been seen in 17 years in the case of one sister and 28 in the case of the other, part of the price paid for a better life in the United States. But today, the Temple of Doom is different. The TV is still blaring, the kids are still running and screaming, but there's fresh Mexican cheese, pineapple, agua fresca, and alfajor on the table. And there is an octogenarian whose visit is possible by another one of his daughters, a recently made U.S. citizen. The old man in his cowboy hat and a pearl-buttoned shirt radiates warmth, which refracts on his daughters' and grandchildren's round faces, which in turn today creates light. And my last poem is What They Say. What they say, Freddie Gray, is how a picked-up preacher man riding along in the police van heard you, hurling yourself inside, banging the reinforced metal of the walls, no matter that you were restrained by leg irons and handcuffs, a sack of stuff with no seatbelt on as the van sped away to learn you to behave, to not look a cop directly in the face. The blame keeps coming back to you again. So many arrests, a thief, a guy caught with Mary Jane. It's like the time your papa sued for the brain damage you and your sister sustained for exposure to lead paint. And the landlord blamed your mama and crack. But I don't blame you, and I don't believe them.
Rhubarb. My grandfather told me how the baby arrived months early. He wrapped her in a dish towel, laid her in a shoebox near the kitchen stove. She wouldn't suck, couldn't make her mother's milk come. He boiled a cow's milk, cradled her close while it cooled, then ran his finger gently under her chin to try to help her swallow. A few drops would go down, but come right back up. After 3 days, he tried goat's milk. She wouldn't suck, wouldn't swallow. Each time, whimpers came from the shoebox. The older girls asked to try goat's milk again. When another day passed, they said, "Daddy, our sister needs a name." He agreed. We'll call her June for the month she came to us. By the end of the week, the rhubarb patch turned red, and he took the girls to the garden to show them how to pull stalks with a sideways yank, to cut off the deep green leaves, floppy and wide as elephants' ears, to wash stalks at the pump. They cut pieces for the pot, added water, and took turns stirring until it boiled down to sauce. When they added sugar, the air turned tart sweet. And then he saw Junie stretch out her slender chin, smack her tiny lips like a baby bird begging for food. Grandfather told me he felt certain Junie wanted rhubarb. He quickly filled a dropper with cooled sauce, and Junie's mouth grabbed hold. She sucked and swallowed. Everyone watched to see if it would come back up. When it didn't, they took turns giving her a tiny bit more. Seems like most of my poetry has something to do with someone in the family or with years living different places, doing different things. Years of having babies. Air Force Base housing in San Antonio, blocks of identical buildings, no trees with leaves feathering the sky. Summer so hot no one touches. By the time I pin the last diaper on the line, the first is dry. We keep jackets handy for howling nor'westers blowing in, dropping temps 40 degrees in an hour. In an apartment in Marianna, Florida, dozens of cockroaches clean kitchen cracks when the lights are out. Air keeps lush hibiscus blossoms wet. Sweating pickers gather pecans around town, but no trees near the hospital where I lie in a whites-only room. Black women in labor wail on gurneys in the hall. Anchorage winters, freezing and dark, winters coated with swirls of glaze, icicles beyond. Months when a clear night moon lights the snow and aurora borealis turns it to rainbows. Short summers grow giant cabbages almost too big to lift, delphiniums 5 feet tall. When the kids are deep into naps, I cross our yard edging the woods, home for bears, moose, and mosquitoes. I pick high bush and low bush cranberries, and when autumn comes, fat wild rose hips. And something that I imagine most of you think you might do when you get older, and there I am, and so I am, writing about the past, smiling. Perhaps I was born smiling, born wide-eyed looking around at what in this waterless world would slip my smile to a laugh. Or was I born anticipating kisses from my blonde curls until 3 redheads joined the family and strangers asked, "Whose little girl are you?" Perhaps I expected kisses meant love when I loaned my lips to more than I can name. The football player, the cowboy with the palomino, the writer, the farmer, the war vet still hanging on to his dope, the artist who found he preferred kissing men. I'm a curious woman, one of cravings, all these years anticipating adventure. But years change, even cravings. I no longer want chocolate as much as pimento-filled green olives. I've discovered love doesn't always mean kissing, but now by a touch, but can be a touch or even a look in the eyes.
Hi, I'm going to read 3 poems from Ordinary Gravity and then finish with one from a new book. This is Louis. Most of us had arrived on some late wave of Western expansion, Scotch-Irish, Scandinavian, German, and mongrel pup, coming by way of Oklahoma or Arkansas, in Mormon dust, through Humboldt dreams, Idaho mines, and Wyoming sheep, praying for rain on some dryland farm where you were lucky to get a chokecherry crop. But here we were, offspring holding our own against each other and these nomadic feet. Except for Louis. It's like he just arrived last year, Italian. His papa ran a grocery store with where salami swung in the garlic air and cheeses sat like fat Buddhas on the crowded counter. At home, his mama kept a pot of spaghetti sauce on the back of the stove. When Louis and I came home from hunting or fishing or rummaging the wild hills, we'd drop a squirrel or rabbit or salmon cheeks into the red mire. On a starving Thursday, I would sit down to their noodles, listen to the chatter, and taste the wonder I never got at home. This has several sections, so I'll read one from each section. Much improved. Hardly anyone dies of typhoid fever anymore. We can send our sons to war without complaint. Lice are quickly dispatched and no one freezes to death. We have piles of antibiotics. The broadsword wounded aren't left in the field to die, with others rotting around them. Of course, there are more bombs and bullets, but morphine is readily available. We can usually save a soldier whose limb's blown off. Yes, things are much improved. We can send more daughters up to the front. They have the right. Soldiering is still a good option for the poor. We're working on pills for madness, more medications to calm the nerves, and we'll get a handle on this suicide business. Yes, we will. Now the title poem, Ordinary Gravity. Some say they see angels at the event horizon. Others, that anything we see is a projection, a hologram somehow created by us to step into and believe. Or the old scenarios of judgment, heaven, and hellfire taught us about symbols, that we get wisdom aslant. We look for soul in the great karmic tides, in the river that never ceases to run, in the dust left by elephant gods. For those who have touched the cold clay of their mother or killed and slaughtered a calf, there is a darkness no lens can pierce. Some are satisfied knowing that our molecules will go on to enrich the thin life of this planet, held in a vast sky that tells us everything in a language we are just beginning to learn. And this is Monsters All from Daybreak on the Water, to be published this fall. Monsters All. I'm fishing around the little grass-tufted islands. Land a couple, keep one. When I haul in a 10-inch rainbow, taking out the hook, I see a little head in its gullet. This greedy fish hadn't digested one meal before going after the artificial bug I offered. Heron and egret, otter and merganser, kingfisher trying to swallow a fish the size of its head, and me, a bunch of marauders on this dappled stream. I slit it open, feed the guts to and the half-swallowed fish to the crawdads. Up at the house, I fry it for lunch.
Okay, so when I was looking for poems, I was trying to find something that was sort of reflecting my mood and everything going on around us. For Black boys who say they have no country, can't argue much with that. Seems America is a fight you can't win, but don't quit yet. Step over the mud, the want and grab. Keep stepping, son, with your made in America walk, that long-legged, heavy stride. Move toward whatever the hell you want. Eyes up, teeth together. Let them see you coming, strong and steady. Like there's nothing can stop you. You've got the light in you. You've got the fire, the fury, the wonder. You're a whole damn nation. I have a lot of friends who cook. And one of them, my friend Jay Rawson, recently passed away. Well, last year, actually. So this was for him. Countdown for Jay Rawson. The last time we saw Jay, he came over with a birthday cake for my husband. Heavy layers of chocolate laced with booze and coffee. Eat it now, he said, so I can see your faces. We bite into thick, gooey slices, and before we even speak, we glow. He smiles his broad-mouthed way, then tells one of his favorite jokes. A doctor tells his patient he's going to die, and the patient says, "Doc, how long have I got?" The doctor says, 10. 10 what? Says the patient. Years, months, weeks? The doctor says 9, 8, 7. Jay laughs first, his high-pitched way. Get it? It's funny because I interrupt. We know why it's funny. Before he leaves, he promises a cheesecake for my birthday with lemon and the butteriest graham cracker crust ever. It's funny because our hearts are burning houses and we don't know one goodbye from the last. It's funny because death isn't funny at all. It's just absence, fickle memories. It's funny because we don't know a damn thing about how many days or years we have coming. And after tomorrow or the next day, we won't even think to count them. And the last one I actually wrote about 3 years ago. There was a protest after a Black man was killed by police. And the news was talking a lot about the protest. Pantoum for flag burners. Another protest in the news. It's only news because they burn a flag. Really only news because they're just two black, thick-lipped boys whose pants kind of sag. It's only news because they burn a flag. No talk of the grief, the fury, black, thick-lipped boys whose pants kind of sag. In the smoke, they're all raised fists and glory. No talk of grief or fury, just a hot TV tag. In the smoke, they're all raised fists and glory. Flames glitter the edges of a limp little flag. Just a hot TV tag. Another protest in the news. Flames glitter the edges of a limp little flag. Really only news because they're just two